There's a wonderful song by a guy named Dave. Oh wow, lost his last name for a moment. Anyway, he does this wonderful song that's, may the horn of plenty sound forever in your spirits. Isn't that lovely? But the cornucopia is a marvelous concept. The idea is that it's an infinite supply of everything we could ever need or want. And there are many futurists, literary, intuitive, and analytical, who have believed for a long time that the 21st century would be the beginning of the cornucopia economy. Imagine everything that you could ever need or want, totally accessible without having to labor for it. And depending on where they were coming from, the intuitive ones saw this as coming from a metaphysical shift. The analytical ones saw this coming from a technological shift, the Star Trek replicator, and a few robots. And the literary ones kind of mixed it up, which is kind of fun. But the interesting thing about a cornucopia economy and the assumption that it's going to happen is the assumption that two things. One, there is an infinite supply. That doesn't quite jive with what we've been talking about, scarcity. And the second is that we would be able to function with an infinite supply and not lose our sense of gratitude. Not lose our sense of, this is a gift. Not lose our sense of, this is something that we have received and can move forward with. And that's a really important thing. And this is why it's an important time to, this is why Thanksgiving exists, let me put it that way, for us to begin to remember again that which we often forget, that everything that we experience, everything that we touch, everything that we smell or taste is a gift. It's a gift from this planet. This planet that we call the earth provides every single thing that we sense with our senses. Quite apart from the metaphysics of it that says there's an infinite field of all that is that manifests as whatever we need. So there's a need for understanding that and a need for honoring that. And this is why, from George Washington through Abraham Lincoln, periodically a president would say, let us declare a day of Thanksgiving. And should I do that? Maybe George had something to say there. And what was really interesting is we're accustomed to saying thanks after an event. But most of these days of Thanksgiving were set up prior to the event for which we would think they were being grateful for. For example, the Abraham Lincoln Day of Thanksgiving was set prior to the end of the Civil War. The George Washington Day of Thanksgiving was originally, there was one during the Revolutionary War, that he called for all the people who were becoming Americans to enter into a state of thanksgiving. Now, why would they do that beforehand? Now, those of you who were raised in a Pentecostal tradition, no. Those of you who are raised in the New Thought tradition or have studied New Thought probably remember. You say thanks because it is already so that you may then experience it. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. What these people understood, what these presidents understood, is that gratitude is a shortcut. It's a shortcut to peace of mind. It is the most immediate way to feel the presence of a loving power, is to enter into a state of gratitude. It's interesting, one of the translations of the word yoga is shortcut. So the yoga of gratitude. When we feel appreciated appreciation. You know, when you see a beautiful flower, a beautiful sunset, there's an incredibly wonderful act of, what we were feeling during joys and concerns, yes? That is the most direct apprehension of the loving presence that we can have. And so what the presidents who called for days of Thanksgiving understood was that when people are in that state, their energy has been lifted, their vibrations have been lifted. They wouldn't use that language. But they would know that that connection was made. And so that people could begin to function at that higher level. And that energy, that loving power could work through us, with us, and as us. It's not about turkey and football. I know. But those are fun to be grateful for, too. I know a lot of beavers are very, very happy right now. And the other thing is, they also were aware, from the New Testament, there's two sets of material from the New Testament. And although if you look at the New Testament, there's this little set of materials called the Gospels, and then there's this big set of materials called the letters. And several of the letters are encouraging us to be thankful in all circumstances. Now, in the Gospels, where we hear thanks, it's always Jesus before asking for something, before expressing a desire, saying thank you. He always said thank you first. They hand him the loaves and the fishes. He says, thank you for these blessings, and they are multiplied. He walks up to the cave where Lazarus has been entombed 2 or 3 days after the entombment. And he says, thank you, Lazarus, come forth. And before he breaks the bread at any of the meals, he always says, thank you, God. Thank you. He's and we use that word in English, but in Hebrew it's my heart is overflowing with delight and gratitude. Yeah, much more appropriate to what we're talking about here. But in the New Testament, in the epistles, the second part of the New Testament, what we have is letters enjoining us to experience thankfulness, to experience gratitude in all circumstances. Because in the epistles there's that understanding. If we can get into that state of gratitude, then we're at the higher energy level and the circumstances are less of a problem. And that's why we have this. No matter what is going on outside of us, there is always something we can focus on, either within or around, or as Helen shared with us this morning, a past moment of time, several moments of just dancing for the fun of it with no brain engaged, yeah? Now, there are lots of studies going on about gratitude in the last 20, 30 years, and this is the overall result. People who experience and express gratitude on a regular basis, and most often that is depicted as keeping a gratitude journal and entering something into it almost every day, the qualities of their life shift. They're more optimistic. They're more aware that there is something wonderful here. Something wonderful is trying to happen. They are not focused on what's not working. They tend to be less materialistic, and in that word, materialistic, it's not that they're no longer interested in the material, it's that they're not grabbing for and needing to have quite so many things as those who are not grateful. Because if you're focused on what you don't have, you want more. If you're focused on how much you have, maybe you don't need so much. More spiritual, and the concept here is that they're more aware that there is something beyond the material world, and they know to turn there. Just by saying, I am appreciating. You don't have to say thank you to anyone. That was a big one for me, because I have a hard time with the idea that there's an old man in the throne. And so I'm not saying thank you to the old guy on the throne. I'm just appreciating. I am so appreciative that this is happening. Yeah? People who are expressing gratitude on a regular basis are not so concerned about themselves because they realize I'm taken care of. I got it. I'm handled. I'm supported. I have what I need. I enjoy my life. Now what can I do for everyone else? Okay. And finally, believe it or not, you feel better about yourself. It's fascinating, but there is a higher level of comfort with who and what we are when those people express gratitude on a regular basis. So this was Brother David Standel-Rast, one of the more recent mystics in our culture, saying that it brings to us, when we are in that gratitude, in place of greed, we experience the desire to share. And in place of oppression, we respect. Okay? We don't try to control and make others be what we think we need them to be because we're being grateful for who and what they are so we can respect them. I don't know why my computer is doing that to us. But we try to make it go away. All right. And as a result of those two, because we're being sharing and respectful, there's a lot less violence. There is more peace. Right? And he says, who does not long for a world of sharing, mutual respect, and peace? And gratitude is one of the ways to get there. And without using those words, again, that's another reason that the president's asked us to have days of Thanksgiving. The studies, I've got the actual footnotes if you want them, but I don't think you care. But you can see there are significant numbers those numbers are significant. Yeah, there's increased sleep quality. There is less pain. There are increases in vitality and energy. There is lower blood pressure. All these things from people who are expressing on a daily basis what they are grateful for, what they appreciate in their lives. So what happens is, as with everything else, our attitudes, our beliefs, our feelings about who we are show up in our actions that then change the people around us, right? Because they're acting with us in a different way because we're acting, and so then we start acting differently because they're acting differently, and then they act differently because we're acting, So that it becomes a positive feedback loop, to use a piece of jargon, a mutual deviation amplification causal loop, and what it does is it leads to increasing well-being in everything. It looks like that. So our emotional state begins to change, our personality begins to be reflective of the new emotional state, which then shows up in our social life, which shows up in our health as well, and in our career. And our whole lives begin to be transformed simply because we have chosen to be grateful on a consistent and regular basis. Isn't that amazing? And you don't have to say thank you to anyone in particular. You simply are it, appreciating and accepting and enjoying. So the only way that we can have a cornucopia economy fundamentally comes down to we have to express the gratitude to get it. And as we continue to express the gratitude, we can have it. But something happened along about the late 1950s and early 60s as the baby boomers came into their teen years and said, I don't want to do what my parents did. And we stopped saying grace. We stopped opening every receiving with thank you. We stopped using the wonderful connection between the word gratitude and the word grace. They are from the same root. So when we grew up, we were taught to say these words that had become, for many of us, a meaningless ritual. And we threw out the baby with the bathwater. We threw out the meaning with the meaningless ritual. And what began to happen is by 1962, this country reached the peak of the quality of life, period. We have never exceeded the quality of life indicators that we had in 1962. And since 1972, our relationship between our personal economics, our finances, and the country's economics has been splitting. And our leisure time since 1976 has gone down. We are now at about 10% of the leisure time we had as a nation compared to where we were in 76. So our prosperity is greatly reduced. Now you guys are retired, so you have lots of leisure. But the average household no longer has one person in the workplace 40 to 50 hours a week, does it? The average household has 2 people in workplaces 50 to 60 hours a week now. The average household no longer has up to 76 hours of spare time in a week. The average household has about 5 hours of spare time in a week in this country right now. I know. It's ridiculous. This is not prosperity. So I'm convinced that when we stopped blessing and being grateful, we began this downward spiral. And we started moving in the direction of the distress and hostility that we have been feeling in this nation increasingly for the last 20, 30 years. But we know that if we can just start being grateful, we can start having all of these things begin to happen, and we can begin to have this work for us. Gratitude is an incredible transformative power in our bodies. That's what this teaches us. In our lives, in every interaction. And if we can start reintroducing it at every level, we will start experiencing an incredible world around us. There is I'm going to go back to that one. One of my churches that I work with is the Grants Pass Center for Spiritual Living, and one of their members has put together a little book, Deborah Perdue, The Grace of Gratitude, Reflections. And this is from her gratitude journal. She basically created a little book. I am grateful for discovering the power of thankfulness. It is the elixir of life, the nectar that changes a seemingly sour situation to sweetness and light. I celebrate what there is to be grateful for in all things, even in grief or dire situations. I can find a measure of thanksgiving if I look hard enough. I bask in gratitude each and every day. So thankful for each person in my life. I deeply appreciate each connection, whether fleeting or a mainstay. When a special person in my life transitions, let me remember how much I am grateful for the deep love in my life that now transcends time and space. I am also grateful to know that nothing and nobody ever really is separated from me, and I am reunited with them whenever I am not connected and concerned with my body. I take time each day to let everyone around me know I care, realizing that that is what really matters. I am grateful for discovering the power of thankfulness. So what happens when we express our gratitude, right? When we express it to someone who's helped us, we've actually enhanced their feelings of, as this study said, self-efficacy. Reducing their feelings of uncertainty, So every time we say thank you to someone who's helped us in the store, at the gas station, whatever, we've actually enhanced their own well-being. And we've encouraged them to go out and help others. When we say thank you to someone, we've encouraged them to do something else for someone else. Isn't that marvelous? When we say thank you to water, we transform its structure. Okay, so that as the water that has been frozen in little tiny drops that peak, if you've ever frozen a drop of water, it makes a little peak, and you put that peak under a microscope. Water that has not been thanked and comes from most rivers and most tap water tends to look like the yellowish slide. And water that has been thanked almost immediately in a deep, heartfelt, spiritual feeling of gratitude will melt into a snow crystal. Okay? Food, in this case rice. Over and over again. Take 2 jars of rice, express thanks and I love, and you're going to maintain its harmonious fermenting process as opposed to its decomposing process. Gratitude to plants. This has become a schoolroom experiment. 2 plants, same conditions. What happens when I express my appreciation and gratitude? The ones that are doing well got the gratitude. And this is an interesting experiment. I first heard about it from Greg Braden, and I was able to chase it down. This was done by the Army back in the 80s. And it was done up in the Pacific Northwest up there. And what they did is, further north of here. Further north. We're Central Coast, right? Okay, the one side is how a healthy DNA molecule replicates itself. Okay, it's nice and stretched out, and it begins to separate. And you can see at the bottom, new pieces are added on, so that as it separates, it's actually creating 2. Okay. The other is a photograph of the interior of the nucleus of a cell in a stressed person. Now you can see that only a few of those molecules. The pink one is the RNA. It's supposed to be single. It's a messenger. But all the blue ones are DNA, and only a few of those are stretched out. The others are squished up and tangled. Can you see what would happen if you tried to do that replication process with loops that weren't connected? So you'd actually have the replication. I should have drawn it with a couple loops there. So you'd replicate without pieces of the DNA. There would be whole sections not replicated. So that the cell, when it is replicating and creating a new cell, will not have all the information it needs to be healthy. So a stressed cell will not produce a healthy new cell. It'll look healthy for a while, but it won't have all the functioning pieces. So the way they found this out was they took these guys in the Army, and they scraped the back of their tongues to get some samples of their DNA, and they sat them down with clocks and movies. And the movies were a mix of, joyful, happy, it's a wonderful life, it's wonderful, it's happy, the happy ones, and then the fearful, angry, intense ones, right? And they were scenes that were lasting usually 2 to 3 minutes long, and they had the movies synchronized with clocks in the room with the DNA. And they put the DNA under the microscope. And during the joyful, happy episodes, the DNA expanded out appropriately, and during the intense, angry, fearful ones, the DNA crumpled up. In the other room, not even in the body.
What?
The DNA under the microscope in the other room reacted just as it was reacting in the body. So they took it to another building. It did the same thing. They took it, finally they put it on a boat. And at 50 miles at sea, they were getting the same reaction. Your DNA knows what you are feeling. When you're in the state of gratitude, your cells can replicate properly. When you're in fear, stress, anger, unhappiness, wallowing in your distress, your cells aren't replicating properly. Isn't that interesting? There's more to that study that I love. But that's just, wow! Gratitude is an incredible power. I love this line. I was going to look up Melody Beatty. She's a writer, and I've forgotten what she wrote.
Codependent.
Thank you, codependent no more. Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos to order, confusion to clarity. It can turn a meal into a feast. Yes? Yes. A house into a home, a stranger into a friend. Gratitude makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. So express gratitude. I was told I have to give you more how-tos. Say thank you. Give gifts. And I love this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. The greatest gift is a part of thyself. And that's not just a part of your body. All right. So, our gratitude has nothing to do with our circumstances. We can enter into gratitude regardless of the circumstances. It's independent. It's a function of where we are putting our attention every single time. It can be cultivated simply by really looking at ourselves and our lives. Look at what we have. In this moment, every single moment of our lives, we've always had everything we needed for that moment. By definition, you're sitting in this room. Now, the sense of entitlement tends to preclude gratitude. So, if I'm looking at myself and I'm going, I think the world owes me that, then maybe I might want to look at that. And what happens is if I can allow myself to experience gratitude, even for that which I believe I am entitled to, then I begin to shift out of that and experience more through words and deeds, enhancing the experience. And finally, when we get it, that everything that has come to us is not because we have done something to get it, but because that's how it is. That's the nature of being. Then there's this incredible deepening of that whole sense of gratitude. And what happens is that we can take a situation that may not feel even comfortable, and we can make it into beauty. Isn't that amazing? I love this drawing, this photograph. It's one of my favorite photographs of people. So, more to do? Try a gratitude journal every night. At least 3 things that you're grateful for. You'll find that you don't have time to write them all. Encourage opportunities, and this is part of the point of a day called Thanksgiving. Encourage opportunities for people to express their gratitude. I know people who every time they sit down at a meal, everyone gets to say, this is what I'm grateful for. And here's an interesting one, a gratitude wall. When you've got a fellowship or a group of folks in community or family, what are we grateful for now? Put it up on the wall. Photographs, statements, words. There's no such thing as too much gratitude.